And this of course requires justice. And as far as the Quran is concerned, it says, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُولَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. We sent our messengers with clear signs and revealed to them the book and the balance. The book, of course, is the guidance, and the mizan is the criteria for judging between right and wrong, justice and injustice, which the prophets of God brought with them. لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ, so that mankind, so that people may establish justice. So one of the primary objectives of the messengers was to establish justice in this world. And the Quran says that if there is no justice, there will be destruction, there will be failure to establish integration of the people. The Quran says, وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ حَمَلَ ظُلْمًا. He is destroyed who commits injustice. And the Quran also says that there can be no peace without justice. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يَلْبَسُوا إِيمَانَهُمْ بِظُلْمٍ. Those who believe and do not mix their faith with injustice, فَأُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنُ وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. They are the ones who have peace, and they are the ones who are guided. So if we want to have peace in this world, there has to be justice, and if there is no justice, there will be no peace, no integration, but rather clash of civilizations. And the Prophet ﷺ said, الظلم ظلمات يوم القيامة. Injustice will be like zulumat. Zulumat is the plural of zulma, and zulma stands for darkness. There is no word in English darknesses you don't say, but of course what you can say is that zulumat stands for pitch darkness. In other words, if there is injustice in this world, there will be pitch darkness for those people in the hereafter. If the darkness in the hereafter will be a reflection of the darkness in this world which we create through injustice. So the greater the absence of justice, the greater the darkness in this world as the hereafter. And these ideas of the Quran and the Sunnah have become reflected in the writings of practically all scholars throughout Muslim history. Abu Yusuf, writing in the 2nd century of Hijrah, says that إِنَّ الْعَدْلَ وَإِنصَافَ الْمَظْلُومِ, that is, justice and justice particularly to those with whom injustice has been committed. وَتَجَنُّبْ الظُّلْمِ, there is a mistake in the instead of noon there should be waw. وَتَجَنُّبْ الظُّلْمَ, and the avoidance of injustice, مَعَ مَا فِي ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْأَجْرِ, along with whatever it has in terms of reward in the hereafter. That was, if there is no justice, there is no injustice, but rather there is justice, then there are two things. The reward in the hereafter, but there is reward in this world also. And the reward in this world, according to Abu Yusuf, يَزِيد بِهِ الْخَرَاجُ وَتُكْثِرُ بِهِ إِمَارَةَ الْبِلَادِ. There is a greater development of the cities or the countries around the world, and as a result, يَزِيد بِهِ الْخَرَاجُ, there is an increase in the revenues of the government, because if there is greater development, there is greater income, and as a result there is greater revenue for the government. So the government will then be able to to provide greater service through infrastructure construction and facilities and so on, and there will be greater development. This is Abu Yusuf writing in the 2nd century. Ibn Taymiyyah writing about 800 years ago, he says, "Kul kan al-adlu amran wajiban." Justice is obligatory. It is obligatory fi kulli shayin, with respect to everything, wa ala kulli ahad, and on every individual or everyone. So it is obligatory on everyone with respect to everything, not only with respect to human beings, but also with respect to animals, birds, insects, and with respect to the environment. وَالظُّلْمُ مُحَرَّمًا فِي كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. And injustice is prohibited on لِكُلِّ أَحَدٍ, on everyone, for everything. فَلَا يَحِلُّ ظُلْمُ أَحَدٍ أَصْلًا. And injustice is not prohibited for anyone, سِوَاءً كَانَ مُسْلِمًا, irrespective whether that person is a Muslim, or kafiran, or a non-believer, or kana zaliman, or even if he is an unjust person. We cannot be unjust even to an unjust person, leave alone being unjust to normal individuals around us in this world. So this is Ibn Taymiyyah. And Ibn Khaldun writing about 600 years ago, he said, "Wala sabila lil imarati illa bil adl," a categorical expression that there can be no development without justice, and inna zulma mukharribun lil umran, that injustice destroys civilization. So this is the writing of some of our scholars, but practically all of them, irrespective of whether they were in Spain or in Iran or in Turkey or in Arab world or in the non-Arab world, there is this fact of the teaching of Islam is clearly emphasized. Benefits of integration and liberalization must be justly distributed. This is where Islam and globalization part their ways. Why? We will see that now. Islam and the new global economy. The new global economy or globalization stands for integration and liberalization, but does not give to justice the place it deserves. It rather emphasizes negotiations. Why is there a difference between negotiated integration and integration with justice? Well, because justice requires a balance in our treatment of everyone. If the rich try to tilt the balance in their favor, then there can be no justice, no balance. As a result of the negotiations which are required by the WTO framework, what happens is that the rich countries go to the negotiating table with greater strength. The statistics indicate that they have with them an average of 6.8 specialists going to the negotiation table, whereas some of the poor countries are not able to take even one specialist with them. And I mean, the people who go there may not be specialists in law, in economics, in trade, in everything that is related to international trade. So Daraasal, they start with a weak position, and they are not able to talk in the manner in which the rich powerful countries are able to talk. So therefore there is a lack of balance in the negotiations. It is the rich and the powerful who have the upper hand. There is a framework for the survival of the fittest. Long drawn negotiations take a long time. The weak are forced to yield. I'm sorry, my voice is like this because I had a cold a few days ago, and the effect still persists on my throat. So these negotiations in this manner are not the right thing for the poorer countries. What should there be? Instead, there should be certain rules established on the basis of justice. Justice requires consistency in the practice of certain values. Certain rules need to be established with respect to different categories of countries. Countries which are very poor and cannot defend their rights, countries which are relatively more developed, countries that are still more developed, and the industrial countries. If there were certain rules established with respect to these countries, negotiations would have led to better results. But this is not done, and therefore there are problems. One would expect that integration would bring about an increase in the exports of all nations, and not just a few countries. One would expect that on the basis of justice, there should be a greater increase in the exports of developing countries than those of industrial countries. Why? Because these countries need to develop, therefore their exports should expand at a faster rate. This is the only way which is going to reduce the inequalities of income and wealth around the world. But if they don't develop faster than the rich countries, then there are bound to be problems. The poor will not be able to expand at a faster rate, and therefore the gap that prevails in the wealth and income will not get reduced. It is because of this reason that a number of the goods that enter into international trade are kept out of the WTO negotiations. One of them is oil, there are petrochemicals, textiles, and agriculture. Of course, textiles and agriculture are exported by a number of very poor developing countries, and the restrictions that are imposed on these are a big problem. We'll come to this in a minute. Of course, justice requires what Ibn Khaldun calls wazi'. Wazi' means a restraining power, a power which is able to enforce justice in a way which is acceptable to all the countries. Therefore, wazi' is extremely important. He should be impartial. He should know the problems that different countries are facing, the strengths of different countries, and the weaknesses of different countries. A wazi' of this kind is necessary for enforcing justice in international trade. WTO could have done this job, but it could have played this role. However, the rich and powerful countries are trying to dominate it to serve their own vested interest. And as a result, there is lack of justice and lack of integration as it should have been around the world. This is what Islam has said for centuries. Developing countries are therefore growing at a slower rate. There is a rise in poverty, there is a rise in current account deficits, a rise in debt servicing burden. And as a result, there were a number of riots. The riots in Seattle, there was a WTO meeting in 1999 in Seattle, and there were riots there. In Washington, there was a fiasco. In IMF and World Bank meetings in Prague in September 2000, there were also problems because the effort to integrate the world in the framework of the rules being prepared by the developed world, there is a problem. Justice has therefore suffered, and integration has been frustrated. The Doha round of trade negotiations has not made much progress. Generally, when integration and liberalization are emphasized, there is the examples of a few countries are given. Few countries which have developed as a result of greater world trade. Among these are Taiwan, South Korea, Malaysia, and so on. Now, of course, we have to bear in mind that giving these examples is not really right, because all developing countries are not in the same stage of development. They are in different stages of development. They need to build institutions. They need to build strong financial institutions. They need to have structural adjustments in their country, reliable legal systems, and good governance. All these assets that are required for a country to develop rapidly, these do not exist everywhere in the same way, and therefore these have to be taken into account while there are negotiations. But this is not done, and therefore negotiation is a long run process. It is very slow and needs longer time frame for developing countries. The developing countries need to be given greater leeway so that they can improve the institutions in their country, improve governance, remove corruption, and so on, which are hurting their development. And as long as this continues, there has to be some leeway given to them so as to not put on them too much pressure at the same time. There is also another problem with respect to integration and globalization. There is also an effort on the part of the Western world to impose its values on poor countries. Globalization, of course, does not mean one culture in a pluralist world. Diversity of cultures can impart richness to the international environment, and therefore the effort to create the same culture, the culture of the Western world all over the world, is not the right thing. This creates difficulties. The effort to criticize Islam, the caricatures that were made about the Prophet ﷺ, all these things create ill will and are not good for the effort to create integration around the world.